Chapter 27, Free the Grapes, Memorial Day, 2020. We honor those who gave their lives defending the freedoms of this country, one of those freedoms being the right to peaceably assemble, which is recalled in this chapter. Free the Grapes. The American Association of Wine Distributors, AAWD, the front organization for the Wine Cartel, is located in a historic building a short walk from the White House. Washington is a world city of fine old buildings, and our nation's capital has something of a Parisian feel. No wonder, as the original master architect was the Frenchman Pierre-Charles L'Enfant, who envisioned broad boulevards, grand avenues, and gigantic stone buildings, similar to those that lined the Quai d'Orsay in Paris. Washington was a city unfamiliar to Paul, who led the life of a gentleman farmer on a mountaintop, who cut the cable because he could no longer afford it. To Paul, Foggy Bottom referred to the valleys below his house filled with low clouds. TV signals couldn't penetrate the hills, even with a $100 antenna designed to pick up the new HD signals. Paul recycled the TV he purchased the year Kate was born, and lived a quiet life with Sheila and Bluey among the grapes, hawks, and rabbits, and for entertainment watched the vines grow, with a glass of wine in their hands after 5 o'clock. However, the man leading a quiet life in the hills had slipped into a pit of vipers. AAWD's office features opulent, handcrafted wood paneling, wide crown molding, and instead of a reception desk at the entrance, a long wooden bar stocked with the world's finest spirits and collection of Napa, French, and Italian wines stored at a constant 57 degrees. The association's director was a woman of a certain age who grew up when school teachers used film strips and overhead projectors as instructional technology. She was raised in Mobile with a tee shot of the country club, attending the Alabama School of Science and Mathematics in the city's charming Garden District. A woman in her early 40s, with teeth of pearls, framed by glossy ruby lips, hair permed straight to her shoulders, who wore a navy blue one-piece power dress tight around her hips, with hem just below the knees and a zipper that ran from the back of the neck to the small of her back. A necklace of white pearls, large as hush puppies, draped her neck, complementing her pearly whites. She resembled a high-ranking member of Congress, a top administration official, a director of government agency. She's what anti-Washington pundits call a lobbyist, a special interest, the scourge of good government, for it was her job to protect the interests of the wine cartel, and since she represented the world, some said the underworld of wine, when she stepped into Opus One Winery in Napa with her patent leather 3-inch heels. Robert Mondavi himself ushered her into a special VIP tasting room reserved for high rollers who purchased exclusive wines by the truckload and served reserve wines excluded from the public tasting menu. Her name was Jessica Fachhandler, and she was about to make a phone call concerning Paul, who would have fallen instantly for her. That would crush him like a grape cast into a crusher destemmer, just enough to break his skin and let some juice trickle out. In a time of economic downturn, with homes lost, fortunes declining, the fear of economic collapse, alcohol sales were soaring, and so was AAWD's revenue, paid by dues-paying members. The lobbying group kept an eye on emerging threats to the distribution system that emerged after Prohibition on behalf of what Paul claimed were familia interests. The dues received by AAWD went towards paying its senior staff generous salaries and keeping them in plush offices steps away from the center of world power. Each cartel member contributed a percentage of its annual sales as dues, which funded eyes that looked beyond the horizon and ears close to the ground to detect any seismic tremors that could threaten the cartel. And the ever-persuasive Jessica effectively lobbied Congress and state legislators to keep the grapes shackled and the cartel strong. Jessica called New York City's dominant distributor, whose annual dues contributed over $3 million to her budget and funded her finely polished teeth and natural pearls. Joey Graziabelli was the CEO of NWYDI, New York Wine Distributors, Inc., who inherited the position from his father, bless his heart, when he went missing. "Why, hello, Joey. It's me, your Jessica. How y'all doing?" she said in her sweet debutante manner. "What's up with you, pussycat?" Joey wondered if she was wearing one of her zip-down dresses. Did you ask me to help you with your zipper?" She chuckled and reminded him, "Now, Joey, you may look at the menu to your heart's desire, but your wife will kill you if you try to order. As much as I'd love to chat with you, this is business. Have y'all heard anything about this little protest in New York?" "What you talking about?" "Well, what we know is there's this guy from California down on his luck who's driven all the way to Wall Street to protest. Says he's a winemaker, but we've never heard of him. None of the family sells his wines. He's ranting and raving about the economy and claiming he can't make a living because he can't sell wine direct to consumers." "Why, that little punk!" "Exactly," Jessica affirmed. "His name is Paul, and he's stirring things up, demanding the right to ship wine direct to buyers and for the right of citizens to distill their own spirits." "He'll be screaming like Pauline when we're through with him. You say this is going down on Wall Street?" "Best as we can tell." "I'll send over a couple of guys to clean up the mess. Thanks, doll." Joey hung up the phone and summoned his enforcer. "Polly, let's head to Wall Street to see what's going on. Some guy is making a stink about not being able to ship wine into our territory." "Okay, boss." They called their limo driver to take them and some muscle downtown. Paul's second 15 minutes of fame were beginning, and so were his troubles. If he had known the history of the bootlegger mantle he wore in jest, he might have been more cautious in his denunciation of the cartel. He was ignorant of racketeers' violence and corruption of government officials during Prohibition, and after repeal, how liquor sales in some regions were dominated and controlled by persons, syndicates, and families with extensive experience from the bootlegging era. Monopolies and oligarchic businesses do not willingly cede power, especially when they have close political friends. The mood in New York City and on Main Street was festering, much like the bubbles of fermentation after pitching the yeast. A tiny bubble here, another one there, until there were enough bubbles to raise a ton of grape skins from the bottom of a tank to the top, hence the power of a lone bubble when it bands together. And isn't a person more powerful than a bubble? That's how fermentations, social movements, and revolutions start, with one. The banks received bailouts, and now their officers, executives, and middle managers were receiving bonuses, while the rest of us grew angrier. Government wasn't doing anything to help us. Of course, it was the government that saved the financial system from collapse, which benefited everyone. But the common perception was the rich were benefiting from government programs, not the 99%. So more people took to the street when they found Paul, Mark, Bluey, and a bottle of California sunshine to warm and embolden their spirits. Paul, whose tongue was loosened by the spirits, tried to jive. "Sticks and stones will break my bones. Call me what you want, but I ain't no hoe. I'm just a guy with a wine dog. My neighbor's Joe the Wino. He's a rich dude who lives in a mansion. He's got a lot of money. Drunk women say he's handsome. His wine ain't better than $2 Chuck. If you want to be a cheapo, drink Joe the Wino's vino. But to help the thirsty people, don't be an ape. Demand your legislature to free the grape. The Bootleggers Express is coming to town. If you want to drink some wine, you better come on down. The people are thirsty and need a drink to survive. It's sunshine in a bottle to help y'all thrive." Paul was a lousy rapper. No matter. He sang and danced with abandon, as a child, spinning around in circles, and his enthusiasm was contagious, although it alone could not sustain the marchers, who needed sustenances. Sympathetic delis nearby donated food. Some bought Paul's wine and sold it. Paul asked the marchers and journalism students to join him on the steps of Federal Hall, hallowed ground where George Washington was inaugurated. Paul recalled that George was a distiller, and, if our founding father, the most upstanding citizen and patriot of these United States, could distill spirits at home, Why not today's Americans? Imagine a world where we grow your own food, pesticide-free. That's so much better for your health and the environment. This is difficult for those living in the big city, but possible for those with a small plot of land. When my dad was growing up, everyone had victory gardens because of the war. It's time for us to plant our own plots. In a word, grow your own. And if you don't have land, buy produce from a local grower who uses organic, sustainable methods. Support your local producer. It's the same with wine and beer. Imagine the satisfaction drinking your own. Now, most of you may not have the time to make beer or wine. Then purchase it from a local brewery or winemaker. And if there isn't a local winemaker, buy it from a sustainable winery that produces wine you like. After dinner, imagine what the French call a digestif, a spirit good for your digestion, perhaps a fine Kentucky bourbon. What if you could make the spirit yourself? That's a rich life, even in times like these. Wholesome food, complemented by wholesome wine and spirits. Grow your own, make your own, drink your own. But if you live in an area controlled by the cartel, your choices are limited. It's the cartel that determines what you drink. The Bootleggers Express is about citizens' rights, freedom, and liberty. We're about healthy living, healthier, pesticide-free food, boutique, handcrafted wine, beer, and spirits, the right to choose, to purchase the products you want, from whom you want. Federal law allows making 3 barrels of wine and 200 gallons of beer per year for personal consumption without a license. Why not 5 gallons of whiskey or brandy? We have a saying, the Bootleggers Express always delivers, and I've brought you a gift, said Paul, who pulled out the flask, explained how his Kentucky friends distilled wine and poured samples. No one had tasted anything like it and quickly understood what the fuss was about. To quote the immortal words of Buffalo Dave from the Texas hills, this shit is good, right? Yes, answered the crowd. But the government doesn't allow citizens to distill their own, even in small quantities. Boo! Do you know why? It's the cartel. They control everything. They prevent laws from being changed. They prevent citizens from distilling their own. They control your choice, limiting what wine and spirits you can purchase, said Paul. What do you want? Whiskey! When do you want it? Now! And they chanted, hey, hey, ho, ho, wine cartels got to go, hey, hey, ho, ho, whiskey cartels got to go. Gandhi ignited a revolution making homespun cloth and walking to the ocean to make homemade salt. I encourage you, the salt of the earth, to brew your own beer, make your own wine, and demand the right to distill your own spirits. For in hard times the people need comfort. And if you can't make your own, then buy it from a friend, winery, or distillery you choose. As Americans, we deserve the right to purchase from whom we want at economical prices, not just the brands chosen by the cartel at higher prices. This is not what Joey and his boys fidgeting on the sidelines wanted to hear. So he sent in Paulie with 2 guys in fedora hats and dark trench coats who wrestled the bottle from Paul's hand and threw it against the concrete, then took cases of wine and smashed them on the sidewalk as the crowd jeered. Paul, emboldened by the brandy and the crowd's enthusiasm, stood his ground. These men are from the cartel, yelled Paul. They're the ones who control what wine you can buy. Do you want to be forced to buy from them? The crowd jeered as men in wingtip shoes futilely chased Bluey, trying to catch him by the tail. Bluey commanded in sheep-herding mode for the violence to stop. All this recorded on video, along with photos uploaded and viewed by a public outraged by the cartel's threatening methods. And more New Yorkers came out to support the brave Aussie and the Bootleggers Express, whose numbers quadrupled to over 1,000 the second day, shouting, "Free the grapes!" demanding out loud, why aren't we allowed to purchase wine direct from wineries? When winemakers viewed online footage of Paul's bleeding cases of wine meandering along the sidewalks, much of it lapped up by Bluey and his canine friends before it reached the sewer gratings, They shipped wine to New York City in violation of state laws and in defiance of the cartel to show solidarity and keep the crowd fueled. The sound of CO2 gas hissing from a pressurized air gas canister in the corridors of Washington, D.C. was Jessica Fackhandler releasing steam as she followed the misbehavior of her client's strongmen, documented for the world to see. She quickly calculated the impact to the cartel if 1 million Americans began distilling 5 gallons of homemade whiskey, the equivalent of 25 bottles of Jack Daniels, Gordon's Gin, or Bacardi rum per person, almost 25 million bottles, at an average wholesale cost of $10 per bottle. That would mean revenue loss to the cartel of $250 million. And what if 4 million citizens began moonshining? That would be $1 billion in lost revenue for the cartel and $5 million less for Jessica's organization, funded by a 0.5% fee paid by cartel members, which would mean fewer pearls, fewer trips to the salon to keep her hair permed perfectly straight, and fewer all-expense-paid trips to Napa. Look what Amazon did to brick-and-mortar bookstore chains. Look what the internet did to newspapers. Could a return to homemade distilling cause the downfall of her organization and her lifetime? And what if all the boutique wineries from Seattle to San Diego, from Arizona to Virginia, began shipping wine direct to consumers in New York and other areas controlled by the cartel? Joey, would you mind sharing with me what the Sam hell y'all all were thinking of going in there and roughing him up? Scolded Jessica. You've made a celebrity out of him. Why don't you call the police? Tell them there's a guy on Wall Street handing out liquor to underage girls and suggest they ask for his New York liquor license. Next to the grapevine, there wasn't a creature more subtle or seductive than Jessica Fackhandler. The potentially disruptive Bootleggers Express must be stopped, but not with a hammer. She began plotting to derail the movement. A winemaker and his dog taking aim on the cartel, marching for Wall Street reforms, and advocating for citizens' rights to make themselves a good drink from scratch was welcome, warming news during cold times, with many Americans ready for a stiff drink. And with the new social media platforms, the story of the Bootleggers Express broadened. On the third day, a student journalist interviewing Paul asked about his favorite wine, and he started raving about Petit Verdot. I'm not familiar with it, she said. How would you describe it? Petit Verdot is a varietal used in many Bordeaux wines, often 10% or less, usually blended with Cab, Merlot, or Cabernet Franc. The wine has a dark, rich color, and it's fragrant. Bluey and I knew 3 months after fermentation when we racked this wine, we had something special. When I gave Bluey a taste, he sniffed and wiggled the stub of his wiggle bud. Aussies being a working breed, he doesn't have a tail to get in the way, and lifted his snout into the air and sniffed deeply, as if he had found a bitch in heat. Bitch is a technical term for a female dog. I mean no disrespect. The wine was that fragrant. He licked it 5 times, his highest ranking. I pulled the sample for myself and immediately realized from the mouthfeel what the fuss was about. Our customers say it's as if they were transported to a perfumery in Hawaii bathed in tropical scents. The fragrance that powerful. That year, we made a wine entirely of Petit Verdot and aged it in a French oak barrel to keep the oak flavor subtle. And 2 months after bottling, we had a wine unlike any other. I've never met a woman who didn't like Bluey's Petit Verdot. The intern posted her video interview and tweeted, "Wine so fragrant you can wear it. Hashtag Petit Verdot. Hashtag wine fragrance. Hashtag Bootleggers Express. Hashtag March on Wall Street." Back in Washington, Jessica, who tracked every post related to the Bootleggers Express, called her friends at the National Security Agency who created a fake Twitter account for her, populating it with tweets to appear authentic, with the handle @Miss Cassandra from Jackson, Mississippi, for she suspected, quite rightly, Paul couldn't resist a beautiful woman named after a prophetess. Jessica turned on the Southern charm, and the bootlegger, like his dog, was a bee prone to the kryptonite of female honey. So in a section of New York, between Soho and Chelsea, a scent mixologist, who had trained her Twitter feed to automatically flag hashtags, #WineScents, #WineFragrance, and other terms related to wine aromatics, saw the interview and thought, "I've got to meet this guy." For she had started a side hustle, making perfumes and eau de cologne that sang the notes of wine. Her Twitter handle was @ScentSommelier, and she wrote, @Bootleggers Express. Dear Bootlegger, is it true your Petit Verdot is as fragrant as perfume? How may I try some? Paul saw the message, and before responding, looked at her profile picture, which featured a composed portrait of perfume bottles surrounded by flowers with wine bottles in the background. Smart, thought Paul. Why give away your identity to stalkers? For a man who was either falling in love with a woman or wasn't, Paul was drawn to this fashionable artiste with sense who loved wine. He answered, @ScentSommelier. It's true. When Flotus visited and tasted and smelled, she splashed it behind her ears. POTUS, after she inhaled this aphrodisiac, postponed tea time 1 hour to spend quiet time with her. @Bootleggers Express, that's amazing. @ScentSommelier, come and see. Join the Bootleggers Express, and I'll pour you perfume in a glass. They agreed to meet the next day for an early lunch. Towards the end of the third day, Paul noticed a shift in Marcher's demographics. He started with a message about grape liberation, but anti-war protesters, anarchists, and others demanding economic justice had joined. Although Paul welcomed the growing support, he became slightly concerned about the direction the group might head. But all that could wait until tomorrow. However, as it was time to bring Bluey for a run and to proselytize a new recruit to the cause, he passed out sunshine in a bottle for Marches to take home that evening, as New York's daytime hipster wine and cheese protesters had to dine and bathe and didn't camp out overnight.